Fasting in Shawwal refers to the observance of voluntary fasts during the Islamic month known as Shawwal. In Islamic teachings, fasting is not limited only to the obligatory fasts of Ramadan. Rather, it also includes optional fasts that carry great spiritual reward. The fasts of Shawwal fall into this category of nafil, worship, meaning they are performed willingly for the sake of Allah without being compulsory. These fasts are especially significant because they are directly connected to Ramadan, a month that focuses on purification of the soul, self-discipline, and strengthening one's relationship with Allah. By fasting in Shawwal, a believer extends the spirit of Ramadan beyond its fixed days, showing that worship is not seasonal but continuous. The concept of fasting in Shawwal emphasizes consistency in faith. Islam values deeds that are small but regular, and the fasts of Shawwal serve as a practical example of this principle. After completing an entire month of obligatory fasting, the believer willingly continues fasting for additional days purely out of devotion. This voluntary act reflects sincerity and love for worship rather than mere obligation. It also helps prevent the sudden spiritual drop that many people experience after Ramadan, allowing the heart and body to remain connected to the discipline and mindfulness developed during the holy month. Shawwal itself holds a special place because it immediately follows Ramadan. The name Shawwal comes from an Arabic root that implies lifting or carrying, which some scholars interpret as a sign of elevation or continuation. In this sense, fasting in Shawwal can be seen as a means of lifting one's spiritual state after Ramadan rather than letting it decline. It reminds believers that the end of Ramadan does not mark the end of obedience or closeness to Allah. Instead, it marks a transition into maintaining those habits throughout the year. The voluntary nature of Shawwal fasting also reflects Allah's mercy. While Ramadan fasting is obligatory and comes with strict rules, the fasts of Shawwal are flexible. A person may choose any 6 days during the month, according to their ability and circumstances. This flexibility allows people of different lifestyles and responsibilities to participate without hardship. The purpose is not burden, but encouragement toward continued worship. This shows that Islamic acts of devotion are designed to nurture the soul gradually rather than overwhelm it. From a spiritual perspective, fasting in Shawwal acts as a sign of gratitude. Completing Ramadan is a blessing, and one way to express gratitude is by continuing acts of worship afterward. When a believer fasts in Shawwal, it is as if they are saying that the sweetness of Ramadan worship has not ended, and that obedience to Allah is valued beyond obligation. Gratitude in Islam is not limited to words, it is shown through actions, and voluntary fasting is a powerful expression of that gratitude. The second keynote focuses on Shawwal as the 10th month of the Islamic Hijri calendar. The Islamic calendar is lunar, consisting of 12 months that are based on the sighting of the moon. Shawwal comes immediately after Ramadan and begins with the celebration of al-Fitr. This placement is deeply meaningful as it follows a month of intense worship with a period that combines joy, gratitude, and continued devotion. The transition from Ramadan to Shawwal reflects balance in Islam's celebration, does not eliminate worship, and worship does not eliminate joy. Being the 10th month, Shawwal marks a turning point in the Islamic year. Ramadan is a peak of spiritual effort, and Shawwal serves as a test of whether the lessons of Ramadan will continue. While Eid al-Fitr marks the completion of obligatory fasting, Shawwal as a month encourages believers to remain connected to acts of obedience. This structure teaches that spiritual growth is not confined to one sacred month but should influence the rest of the year. The Hijri calendar itself is based on significant moments in Islamic history, particularly the migration Hira of the Prophet Muhammad, letter of T, from Makkah to Medina. Each month carries spiritual meaning, and Shawwal's significance is heightened due to its close relationship with Ramadan. In pre-Islamic times, Shawwal had negative cultural associations, but Islam transformed its meaning by attaching acts of worship and reward to it. This reflects how Islam reformed cultural beliefs and redirected them toward positivity and purpose. Shawwal is also important because it contains rulings that shape Islamic practice, such as the prohibition of fasting on the first day, Eid al-Fitr. This teaches obedience and balance. While fasting is beloved, there are times when refraining from fasting is itself an act of worship. After this single day of celebration, Shawwal becomes an open field for voluntary worship, especially fasting. This clear distinction helps Muslims understand that Islam is not rigid, but guided by wisdom and moderation. The position of Shawwal after Ramadan also highlights continuity in worship. Just as prayers are followed by voluntary Sunnah prayers, Ramadan is followed by voluntary fasts. This pattern reinforces the idea that obligatory acts are the foundation, while voluntary acts strengthen and complete them. Shawwal, as the 10th month, becomes a practical reminder that spiritual growth does not end with the completion of an obligation but is deepened through additional effort. In a broader sense, Shawwal represents renewal. After the forgiveness, mercy, and discipline of Ramadan, Shawwal offers believers a chance to rebuild their routine with a purified heart. Fasting during this month helps anchor the lessons of patience, self-control, and mindfulness into daily life. Thus, the month of Shawwal is not merely a continuation of the calendar, but a continuation of spiritual momentum that can shape the believer's entire year. The third keynote focuses on the understanding that Shawwal comes immediately after the month of Ramadan, which gives the fasts of this month a unique spiritual position. Ramadan is the most intense period of worship in the Islamic year, filled with fasting, prayer, recitation of the Quran, charity, and self-restraint. When Shawwal begins, the physical obligation of daily fasting ends, but the spiritual journey is meant to continue. Fasting in Shawwal acts as a bridge between Ramadan and the rest of the year, ensuring that the discipline, patience, and awareness of Allah cultivated during Ramadan do not suddenly fade away. This connection highlights that Islam encourages steady growth rather than short bursts of devotion followed by neglect. Coming after Ramadan, Shawwal fasting also serves as a sign of acceptance of one's Ramadan efforts. Many scholars explain that one of the indications that an act of worship has been accepted is the ability and desire to perform good deeds afterward. When a person willingly fasts in Shawwal, it reflects that their heart is still inclined toward obedience and spiritual effort. This desire is not driven by obligation or social pressure, but by inner motivation. In this way, Shawwal fasting becomes a spiritual mirror, reflecting the impact Ramadan has had on a believer's heart and habit. The transition from Ramadan to Shawwal also teaches balance between celebration and worship. Eid al-Fitr marks a day of joy, gratitude, and lawful enjoyment, reminding Muslims that Islam does not promote constant hardship or deprivation. However, immediately after this celebration, the option of fasting in Shawwal reintroduces discipline in a gentle, voluntary form. This balance ensures that joy does not turn into heedlessness and worship does not turn into burden. Instead, both coexist in a way that nurtures emotional and spiritual well-being. From a psychological and spiritual standpoint, the period after Ramadan can be challenging. Many people experience a decline in motivation once the structured environment of Ramadan ends. Fasting in Shawwal provides a soft continuation of structure, helping individuals maintain control over desires and routines. It reinforces the idea that self-discipline is not limited to a sacred month, but is a lifelong practice. This continuation helps believers internalize the lessons of Ramadan, transforming them into lasting character traits rather than temporary behaviors. The fourth keynote emphasizes that fasting in Shawwal is a nafil, or voluntary act of worship rather than an obligation. In Islam, voluntary acts hold a special place because they reflect sincerity and love for Allah without the pressure of duty. When a person engages in nafil fasting, they do so purely for reward, closeness to Allah, and personal spiritual growth. This voluntary nature makes Shawwal fasting accessible and flexible, allowing individuals to participate according to their capacity without fear of sin, if they are unable to do so. Nafil acts of worship also serve an important role in strengthening a believer's relationship with Allah. While obligatory acts establish the foundation of faith, voluntary acts build intimacy and closeness. Fasting in Shawwal falls into this category of worship that beautifies and completes a person's spiritual life. It demonstrates eagerness to go beyond the minimum requirements, reflecting a heart that seeks Allah's pleasure rather than merely fulfilling duties. Another important aspect of Shawwal fasting being nafil is that it removes hardship from the religion. Islam is based on ease and mercy, and voluntary worship allows individuals to choose acts that suit their circumstances. Someone may fast all 6 days consecutively, while another may spread them throughout the month, and another may fast fewer days if unable. All of these choices fall within the spirit of voluntary devotion. This flexibility reinforces the Islamic principle that worship should bring a person closer to Allah without causing unnecessary strain. Voluntary fasting also plays a role in compensating for shortcomings in obligatory acts. Human effort is never perfect, and even during Ramadan there may be moments of weakness, distraction, or mistakes. Nafil fasts, such as those in Shawwal, help cover these deficiencies and elevate the overall reward. This understanding encourages believers to see Shawwal fasting not as an extra burden, but as an opportunity to strengthen and complete their worship. In essence, the fact that Shawwal fasting is voluntary highlights its spiritual beauty. It is an act performed out of choice, love, and awareness rather than compulsion. This transforms fasting from a duty into a gift, allowing believers to continue tasting the spiritual sweetness of Ramadan while preparing themselves for a year of consistent obedience and mindful living. The fifth keynote focuses on the specific practice of fasting 6 days in the month of Shawwal. This practice is well known in Islamic tradition and is highly encouraged due to its immense spiritual reward. After completing the obligatory fasts of Ramadan, observing 6 additional fasts in Shawwal is considered a continuation of that devotion. These fasts are not random or symbolic. They are a structured act of worship rooted in authentic teachings. The number 6 carries significance, not because of the number itself, but because it complements the fasts of Ramadan in a way that multiplies reward and reinforces consistency in obedience. Fasting 6 days in Shawwal teaches believers that worship does not abruptly stop after fulfilling an obligation. Instead, it encourages continuity and commitment. A person who has just completed a month of fasting may find it easier to fast a few more days, especially when done with intention and awareness. These 6 fasts act as a spiritual anchor, helping the believer stay connected to the self-control, patience, and mindfulness practiced during Ramadan. Without such continuation, it is easy for spiritual routines to weaken once daily fasting is no longer required. Another important aspect of the 6 fasts of Shawwal is flexibility. They can be observed consecutively or spread throughout the month according to personal convenience. This flexibility highlights the mercy and ease within Islamic teaching. Some people prefer to fast immediately after Eid to maintain momentum, while others choose specific days such as Mondays and Thursdays. Both approaches are valid, and the reward remains intact as long as the intention is sincere and the fasts are completed within Shawwal. These 6 fasts also carry a deep motivational element. Knowing that a small number of voluntary fasts can lead to immense reward inspires believers to engage in extra worship without feeling overwhelmed. It shows that Allah values intention and consistency more than quantity alone. This encouragement helps people who may feel spiritually weak after Ramadan to gradually re-engage with worship rather than abandoning it altogether. The 6th keynote centers on the prophetic encouragement for fasting in Shawwal. The Prophet Muhammad literally recommended fasting 6 days of Shawwal, and this recommendation has been preserved through authentic narrations. The encouragement from the Prophet literally elevates this practice from a personal preference to a Sunnah act of worship. Following the Sunnah is an expression of love, obedience, and connection to the Prophet literally, and fasting in Shawwal allows believers to embody these values in a practical way. The prophetic guidance regarding Shawwal fasting also reflects a broader principle in Islam, that good deeds are multiplied by Allah's generosity. According to well-known teachings, each good deed is rewarded multiple times, and fasting in Shawwal benefits from this divine generosity. By following the Prophet's guidance, believers align themselves with a system of worship that emphasizes mercy, reward, and spiritual growth rather than hardship. Another dimension of this prophetic encouragement is the emphasis on balance and sustainability. The Prophet consistently advised moderation in worship and warned against practices that lead to burnout. The 6 fasts of Shawwal are a perfect example of sustainable devotion, short, manageable, and deeply rewarding. They provide an opportunity to remain spiritually active without the intensity of a full month of fasting, making them accessible to a wide range of people. Following the Prophet's encouragement also strengthens the sense of unity within the Muslim community. Across different cultures and regions, Muslims observe these fasts with a shared intention and understanding. This collective practice reinforces a sense of belonging and continuity in Islamic tradition. It reminds believers that their acts of worship are connected to a long chain of faith, stretching back to the Prophet's life and carried forward by generations of Muslims. Ultimately, the encouragement to fast 6 days in Shawwal reflects the compassion and wisdom of Islamic teachings. It offers believers a way to preserve the spiritual gains of Ramadan, earn immense reward, and maintain a close connection with the Sunnah. Through this practice, fasting becomes not only an act of restraint, but a source of spiritual strength, gratitude, and ongoing renewal.